Hey people, welcome to the Run Tester. It's Kieran here. I am at the New Forest Marathon. We're about 45 minutes away from the start, and in this video I'm going to be testing the Garmin Enduro 3 up against the Garmin Fenix 8. I've also got the Garmin Enduro 2 on here for comparison. We're looking at the battery life, the GPS accuracy and the heart rate, all of those things out here on the New Forest Marathon course. Mixed trail terrain. Rain has stayed away so far, but it might be a bit muddy out there. We're going to see how we get on, so let's go take a look. So it's done. 306, 307, 308, I don't know, something like that. That's a PB on this course. Ran my little heart out there. It's hard, it's wet. It's beautiful always, this race. What I mean. And well done, well done. It's good people out on course, great support. And the shoes held up well. I'm going to go and get a drink of water, then I'll do a little wrap on how the shoes held up and I'll tell you how these watches got on. But New Forest Marathon number 8, I think it's done. So I've now done the New Forest Marathon a total of 8 times, and it's become one of my favourite races of the year. This year Garmin kindly gave me a place to run. They're a main sponsor of the race, they're a long-term supporter, partly because their UK HQ is based very nearby to where the route of the course is. Now this is a mixed terrain marathon that weaves its way through the New Forest National Park. If you've not been to the New Forest National Park, it's basically a 220 square mile national park with forests, moorlands. It's teeming with wildlife. It's famous for its wild horses that roam and graze on the open ground. But there are more than 7,000 animals actually there grazing on the open forest. And the race is run on a mix of sort of compact gravel paths, roads, forest floor, trails, grass. There are a few hills here that ask questions and enough gentle inclines to make this a testing race, soft ground, all of that kind of stuff. I love the way that just as you get bored of running the road, you kind of turn onto a gravel trail, or then when you're done with the trails, you flip up a hill, then down a hill onto some grass or some mud. It's constantly changing and the views are absolutely stunning. During the race, I ended up running alongside half a dozen galloping wild horses. You get kind of treated to views like that. There are frequent aid stations. They do tend to only offer water and energy drinks, so they're not that well stocked, but you will run most of it as well without any crowds. But I find the solitude is one of the big things about this. You're with other runners, but it's nice and quiet. There's plenty to distract you in terms of the views. The start and finish are really fast and stress-free. It's calm and easy. Getting out the car park after the race is always a slog. It's a kind of one way in and out, which makes it difficult. I would get a bus or get dropped off if you can. But the event village also has loads of food, trucks, a bar, live music. And when the sun's out, it's a great place to sort of hang around post-race and chill out. Less so in the rain, but it's a great event. One I highly recommend. It'll test you in ways I think an urban city marathon might not. But if you want a run that will fill your soul up in a way that an urban city marathon might not as well, spending a few hours running through stunning scenery, I think this is the way to go. I'd say it's almost like a race like no other. There are 5k, 10k, half and marathon options as well on the same day, running at different times. So everyone can take part. They all kind of finish roughly about the same time as well. For the marathon, the entry is open now for 2025, priced at £65. Definitely one if you're coming from outside of England. It's an hour and a half out of London to get a train down, nice and easy, and this would take you to a very special part of England indeed. It's a race, it's like a destination race that I would really, really highly recommend. So we're still busy testing Garmin's new watches, the Enduro and the Fenix 8 for our full reviews, and I took this opportunity to do a head-to-head marathon test of the Enduro 3 and the Garmin Fenix 8. My version of the Fenix is the 51mm AMOLED. I also put that up against the Garmin Enduro 2, which was paired to a H10 chest strap. I was primarily testing the battery life, comparing the GPS accuracy in a heavily forested area and looking at the optical heart rate performance of the Enduro 3 and the Fenix 8 up against that chest strap. Now, if we start with the GPS performance, I had all three watches in max accuracy mode using all systems dual frequency and making the most of the automatic Sat IQ switching, which is designed to eke out the best performance for accuracy, but also helping to spare battery life. So it's almost sort of trying to work out how to get you the best without using too much juice. All three watches tracked under the marathon distance, and I noticed I was passing mile markers before my watches beeped, and that's always a bit of a worrying sign. I spotted a large number of other runners actually reporting on Strava after the race though, that mentioning their watches came up short as well. So it's clearly not a watch specific option because they were using different watches, Garmin's, Coros, all the other ones. But for the record here, the Enduro 3 registered 25.93 miles, the Fenix 8 registered 25.87 miles, while the Enduro 2 clocked 25.62 miles. The Enduro 2 was the worst, but that one was strapped to a belt, so that's not surprising because it's not quite as good at hitting the satellites if you've got it down there. Now, if you dig into the trace a little more closely, they all have moments where they're a bit off track, but the Fenix 8 seems to hug the actual trails, the roads and the track slightly better than the Enduro 3, so a slightly better performance in terms of laying down those traces. Though for a run where there's a lot of forest cover, I think actually both the Fenix 8 and the Enduro 3 performed generally well. Even the Enduro 2, strapped to an inferior tracking location, held its own nicely. Now from this test, I'd say it's a tick for the general GPS performance in max accuracy mode. And I wouldn't say on GPS accuracy there's a reason to choose between any of these watches, one over the other. Now moving on to heart rate, and again I'm pretty impressed with the Enduro 3 and the Fenix 8 optical performance. They both track relatively well up against the H10, though the Garmin Fenix 8 is a much closer match when you look at how the heart rate performed. You can see the Garmin Enduro 3 has this moment where it drops and then lurches and isn't quite as on point as the Fenix 8 throughout the duration of the marathon test. But again, I'd say a solid performance from both. Now, aside from feature differences, one of the big differentiators between the Garmin Fenix 8 and the Enduro 3 is the bright AMOLED screen, and partly as a result of that, what it does to the battery life. The battery life of these two watches is different. Now, using all systems, the Enduro 3 is supposed to offer 80 hours runtime, rising to 144 hours in the right solar conditions. The Fenix 8 AMOLED, with the always-on screen switched on, is supposed to offer 54 hours runtime. The Garmin Enduro 2, for reference, is supposed to offer up to 78 hours, rising to 96 hours when you get the right solar conditions. Now, I took all three watches off charge at 100% in the morning of the race. By the time I got to the race, the two Enduros had dropped 1%, the Fenix had dropped 2%, but I put them all in max accuracy mode using the Sat IQ, with all three screens had always on. I ran the marathon in 3 hours, 8 minutes, a PB on that New Forest Marathon course. And the Garmin Fenix 8 burned 6%, the Enduro burned 5%, while the Enduro 2 burned 6% as well. Now, those differences in the performance of the Enduro 3 and the Fenix, they might well kind of expand as you run longer, as you're using the watch for longer. They might get bigger. But I expected to see a much bigger drop-off in the Fenix 8, even from that marathon test. In my other tests in general while running, though, the Enduro 3 hasn't struck me as a significantly longer-lasting watch when I've been running the power settings like for like. I've not run longer than 3 hours in tests though, and if you leave the always on screen outside of runs, there's a notably more rapid burn on the Fenix 8. It drops much quicker. But from this test, I think if you're a marathon runner weighing up whether you want the AMOLED screen and wondering how that might affect the overall battery life performance over a marathon distance, and you're worried you're going to get a significantly lower battery life on the Fenix 8 versus the Enduro 3, I think this suggests that you don't really need to worry about that too much. Now then, with its combination of a big stack of lively midsole foam, full-length carbon plate, lightweight uppers, 4.5mm lugs, the ASICS Metafuji was almost made for races like the New Forest Marathon. Mixed terrain, runnable trails and tarmac. It's not all that technical, routes that you can attack at pace. So I felt like this was the perfect test for this shoe. Now we're posting a full marathon test video of the Metafuji in due course up on the channel. So I'll keep this nice and top line and I'll save the detail for more kind of thorough look at this shoe. Now this is a race, the New Forest Marathon is a race that when it's dry it can happily take a road shoe, and there were plenty of Alpha Flies and Adios Pro 3 out there even when it was wet this time round. But it had been raining for 3 days, and so I had a toss up between the Metafuji, the Tecton X3 and the Adidas Agravic Speed Ultra. Three shoes that I think bring road shoe sort of tech and performance to the trails that can cope with exactly this kind of run. In the end, I decided to go for the Metafuji. and they performed really well. I was averaging around 7 minutes 15 per mile, some a little faster. And what you get from this shoe is lightweight, pretty bouncy, energetic ride. When you're running with good form, moving with intent, it gives back. You know, it's not as lively as a carbon road shoe. You wouldn't necessarily expect it to be, but compared to more traditional trail shoes, this is night and day. If trad trailers are more firm, stiff and connected to the ground, the Big Stack here is more spring, bouncy, but you do lose some of that ground contact. So when it's runnable, that's kind of fine. If you hit lumps, and they don't have to be that big, I think you do feel a lack of stability. There's a bit of wobble here, and I'm not sure I would have the trail technique to use these on more technical, down sort of steep terrain descents and that kind of thing. But other plus points here, there's plenty of room. It's got a nice roomy toe box, good for the marathon distance. Now those lightweight uppers as well meant that even if water got in, they didn't sort of seem to hold the water. It dissipated quite quickly, so they didn't become heavy. I had 0 foot fatigue over the 3 hours. Sometimes I felt a little softness along with the softer trails that left me digging a bit harder than I would want, maybe harder than you'd get with something that's stiffer and snappier as a trail shoe. But that said, the grip is excellent. The 4.5mm lugs were nicely sticky, even in some of the soggier, muddy bits and on some wet grass. I wouldn't want to have to kind of twist and turn a lot in the shoes with these shorter, sort of shallower lugs, but in a straight line, they coped nicely. Then on the road, I didn't feel like I was being too sucked down, so there's some good balance here. On the whole, for a runnable marathon distance on mixed trails and tarmac, the ASICS Metafuji absolutely delivered. I would have no problem picking them up to do this same race again next time round. So there you have it. That was my race test at the New Forest Marathon. I hope you found it insightful. We'll have full reviews of the Garmin watches and the ASICS Metafuji on the channel soon. So please hit subscribe and ring that bell so that you'll know when those reviews land. If you want to know more about the Garmins, we've got videos up on the channel now that are worth a watch. We did some in-depth kind of first tests. You might find those useful. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by. And until next time, happy running, people.